Audie Murphy was born Audie Leon Murphy on June 20, 1925, in Kingston, Texas. He was the seventh of 12 children born to Emmett and Josie Bell Murphy, a struggling sharecropping family barely surviving the Great Depression. His father abandoned the family when Audie was still young, and tragedy struck again when his mother died while he was just 16 years old. Orphaned with only a fifth-grade education, Murphy was forced to leave school and take whatever work he could find to help support his younger siblings. These brutal early years forged the traits that would later define him: unyielding responsibility, quiet toughness, and an instinct to protect those around him at all costs. In 1942, Murphy enlisted in the U.S. Army after being rejected by both the Navy and the Marine Corps for being too small and underweight. At just 5 feet 5 inches tall and barely 110 pounds, he seemed an unlikely candidate for battlefield heroics, but what he lacked in size, he more than made up for in resolve. During World War II, Murphy fought across North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany, rapidly earning a reputation for fearless leadership and extraordinary bravery. Fellow soldiers spoke of his calm under fire and his willingness to take impossible risks if it meant saving others. On January 26, 1945, near Holtzwihr, France, Murphy performed the act that would cement his legend. Alone, wounded, and massively outnumbered, he climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and used its .50 caliber machine gun to hold off an entire company of German soldiers for more than an hour. While firing on the enemy, he simultaneously directed artillery strikes over the radio. Against all odds, he held the position until reinforcements arrived. That moment earned him the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States at just 19 years old. By the end of the war, Murphy had received every major U.S. combat award for valor, including the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, the Bronze Star, and 3 Purple Hearts. In total, he was awarded 33 medals and decorations from the United States and Allied nations, making him the most decorated American soldier of World War II. But heroism on the battlefield did not shield him from what came next. The Audie Murphy mystery finally solved, and it isn't good. Returning home as a national icon, Murphy quietly struggled with the psychological wounds of war. He suffered from what was then known as battle fatigue, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. Nightmares, insomnia, and emotional isolation followed him long after the fighting ended. Despite these internal battles, Murphy refused to stay silent. Using his fame, he became one of the first public figures to openly discuss the emotional toll of combat, advocating for veterans, and pushing for greater awareness of mental health long before the topic was widely accepted. Behind the medals and movie roles was a man still fighting a war no one could see, one that would shape the rest of his life in ways far more complicated than his legend ever suggested. Murphy transitioned into a Hollywood career that, against all expectations, proved remarkably successful. Over the course of his acting life, he appeared in more than 40 films, most famously To Hell and Back in 1955, a biographical war film based on his own best-selling memoir. In a rare and deeply affecting choice, Murphy played himself, reenacting his wartime experiences on screen. The performance was restrained, almost uncomfortable in its honesty, and that authenticity resonated with audiences. The film became a major box office hit, cementing his status as both a national war hero and a legitimate movie star. Despite his success, Murphy never considered himself a great actor. He approached the craft with the same humility that defined his personal life, viewing acting as a job rather than a pedestal. Outside of film, he explored songwriting, co-writing several country and western songs, some of which were recorded by major artists of the era, including Dean Martin and Charley Pride. In 1957, Murphy landed a standout role as the Utica Kid in the classic western Night Passage, sharing the screen with Hollywood legends James Stewart and Dan Durrell. The film marked a turning point in his career, proving he could hold his own alongside industry heavyweights and solidifying his place within the Western genre that dominated American cinema at the time. The year 1959 became one of the most prolific and defining periods of Murphy's acting career. He appeared in 3 westerns in a single year, each highlighting a different facet of his screen presence. In The Wild and the Innocent, he starred opposite Sandra Dee, with their chemistry bringing a sense of vulnerability and freshness to the familiar frontier narrative. That same year, Murphy stepped behind the camera as an uncredited co-producer on the stark black-and-white drama Cast a Long Shadow, working closely with director Walter Doniger. The collaboration hinted at Murphy's growing influence in Hollywood beyond acting alone. But it was no name on the bullet that truly changed how critics viewed him. In the taut psychological western, Murphy portrayed a hired killer with chilling restraint. The film received widespread acclaim for its atmosphere and moral tension, and Murphy's layered performance was praised as his most complex to date, elevating his reputation as a serious and versatile leading man. Murphy's talents extended beyond the big screen. In 1960, he made a notable television appearance alongside the formidable Thelma Ritter in an episode of Startime titled The Man. The performance demonstrated his natural ease in the emerging medium of television, further expanding his audience. Beyond entertainment, Murphy's deep sense of patriotism remained constant. In the early 1960s, he donated his time, presence, and star power to support the U.S. Army's The Big Picture television series, reinforcing his lifelong commitment to the men and women who served, long after his own battles had ended. For 3 episodes, Murphy did more than simply appear on screen. He became a trusted public face of the U.S. military's effort to communicate with civilians, helping bridge the gap between armed forces and everyday Americans. His commitment did not go unnoticed. In 1960, Murphy was awarded the prestigious Outstanding Civilian Service Medal in recognition of his contributions. One of the most notable installments was the episode Broken Bridge, which sent Murphy traveling to military installations across Germany, Italy, Turkey, and the American Southwest in New Mexico. The episode showcased cutting-edge military technology and modern weaponry, blending entertainment with real-world relevance and reinforcing Murphy's unique position as both war hero and public educator. During this same period, Murphy's creative collaborations flourished, particularly with screenwriter Claire Huffaker. Huffaker penned the scripts for 2 of Murphy's most significant 1961 westerns, 7 Ways from Sundown and Posse from Hell. These films played perfectly to Murphy's strengths, pairing his quiet intensity with morally complex storytelling, and further solidified his standing as a leading figure in Western cinema. Another pivotal partnership emerged with producer Willard W. Willingham and his wife, writer Mary Willingham. The couple became close friends of Murphy during his early Hollywood years, and their professional relationship quickly followed. Willard produced Murphy's 1961 television series Whispering Smith and co-wrote the screenplay for Battle at Bloody Beach, blending gritty realism with taut action. The collaboration continued through the mid-1960s with films such as Bullet for a Bad Man in 1964 and Arizona Raiders in 1965, projects that further shaped Murphy's enduring Western legacy. Together, the Willinghams also wrote Gunpoint and the screenplay for 40 Guns to Apache Pass in 1967, which would become Murphy's final starring role in a Western film. Murphy also broadened his scope internationally, filming Trunk to Cairo in Israel in 1966. The production reflected his willingness to step outside traditional American settings and take on roles that challenged both him and his audience. Among the most influential relationships of Murphy's career was his long-standing partnership with director Bud Bedischer, one that began in an unlikely place, a boxing gym. Murphy had asked to serve as Bedischer's sparring partner at Terry Hunt's athletic club, a meeting that sparked a creative bond lasting nearly 2 decades. That connection led to Murphy starring in the title role of Bedischer's first Western, The Cimarron Kid, in 1951. A film that laid the groundwork for a series of future collaborations. Their professional relationship endured through the years, culminating in 1969 when Boudichere wrote A Time for Dying, Murphy's final film and a poignant closing chapter in their shared creative journey. Although plans existed for 2 additional projects, A Horse for Mr. Barnum and When There's Something to Do, those films were never realized, leaving fans to speculate on what might have been had the partnership continued. Away from the screen, Audie Murphy's personal life reflected a mix of triumph and turbulence, echoing the unresolved struggles he carried long after the battlefield. In 1949, he married actress Wanda Hendricks, a prominent Hollywood figure who had appeared in numerous films throughout the 1940s and early 1950s. Their marriage drew intense media attention, fueled both by Murphy's rising fame as the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II and by Wanda Hendricks' growing success in Hollywood. On paper, they looked like a golden couple. In reality, the relationship was quietly unraveling. The pressures of Hollywood life weighed heavily on them. Murphy's unresolved psychological wounds from the war, what we now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, cast a long shadow over their home life. Nightmares, insomnia, and emotional distance made intimacy difficult, while constant public scrutiny only magnified the strain. Managing a high-profile marriage while carrying unspoken trauma proved overwhelming for both of them. After 2 turbulent years of trying to make the relationship work, Murphy and Hendricks divorced in 1951. It closed a chapter that had been equal parts romance and spectacle, one shaped as much by public expectation as private pain. For Murphy, it was another reminder that fame had not brought the peace he was searching for. Just 4 days after the divorce was finalized, Murphy made a decision that stunned even those closest to him. He remarried, this time to Pamela Opal Lee Archer, a former airline stewardess whose calm presence and grounded nature stood in sharp contrast to the glamour and volatility of his first marriage. Their relationship developed quickly, almost urgently. For Murphy, the rapid remarriage reflected a deep desire for stability, structure, and a sense of home he had never truly known, even before the war. Pamela offered something Hollywood never could: consistency, privacy, and emotional steadiness. In many ways, she became an anchor during the most difficult years of his life. This period also marked a turning point that sheds new light on what many later described as the Audie Murphy mystery finally solved. And it isn't good. Beneath the medals, movie roles, and public admiration was a man desperately trying to outrun trauma that never loosened its grip. Together, Audie Murphy and Pamela Archer built a family that became the foundation of his later years. They had 2 sons, Terry Michael Murphy, born in 1952, and James Shannon Murphy, born a few years later. Terry would eventually pursue work in the entertainment industry himself, continuing the family's connection to Hollywood, while James grew up fully aware of the extraordinary legacy attached to his last name. Both sons were raised with an understanding of their father's heroism and the heavy costs that came with it. Unlike his first marriage, Murphy's union with Pamela endured, providing him with a greater degree of emotional support and personal stability than he had ever known before. It did not erase his inner struggles, but it gave him something he had long searched for: a place to belong. Pamela's role in Murphy's life extended far beyond that of a supportive spouse. She became his closest confidant, the person who helped him navigate the relentless pressures of fame, lingering trauma, and the weight of public expectation. Despite the chronic pain he lived with and the emotional scars left by the war, Murphy's family remained his most stabilizing force. The presence of his sons and the relative steadiness of his marriage to Pamela stood in sharp contrast to the turbulence of his earlier years. Home life gave him something rare in his world: routine, grounding, and brief moments of peace. For a man who had spent his youth fighting poverty and his adulthood fighting memories, that sense of normalcy mattered deeply. Yet for decades, the circumstances surrounding the death of Audie Murphy, one of the most decorated soldiers in American history and a successful Hollywood star, have remained clouded by speculation and unanswered questions. His rise from an impoverished Texas farm boy to a national hero is well documented. What happened at the end of his life is not. On May 28, 1971, Murphy was killed in a plane crash on Brush Mountain near Catawba, Virginia. He was traveling aboard a small twin-engine Aero Commander aircraft that went down in severe weather while flying at low altitude through mountainous terrain. He was only 45 years old. The official explanation was simple and final: poor visibility, bad weather, and pilot error. A tragic accident. Case closed. But almost immediately, doubts began to surface. Murphy's complicated personal history, his long struggle with what we now recognize as PTSD, and his increasing withdrawal from public life fueled questions that refused to fade. For many, the official version felt incomplete, too neat for a life marked by complexity and quiet suffering. Over time, speculation hardened into rumor. Conspiracy theories took root. Some claimed Murphy had been targeted by intelligence agencies because of alleged knowledge he had acquired through Hollywood and political circles. Others pointed to enemies tied to private business ventures or suggested retaliation connected to powerful figures he may have crossed. Still more believed organized crime played a role. None of these theories were ever substantiated, yet they persisted, passed down through books, documentaries, and whispered conversations among fans and historians. The mystery grew not because evidence supported it, but because the man at the center of it had lived such an extraordinary life. And now, decades later, newly examined records and investigative findings have begun to paint a clearer picture of what truly happened that day. The conclusion, however, is not one of intrigue or hidden enemies. It is something far more unsettling and far more human. Because the truth behind Audie Murphy's death doesn't reveal a grand conspiracy, it reveals a tragedy rooted in vulnerability, circumstance, and the quiet cost of a life spent carrying more than any one person should have had to bear. These theories gained traction because several details surrounding the crash were never clearly understood by the public. Why was the aircraft flying so low through mountainous terrain? Why did early reports contain small inconsistencies in timelines and radio communication? And why were portions of the wreckage either badly damaged or never recovered at all? For years, those unanswered questions created space for speculation to grow. Murphy's family firmly rejected any suggestion of foul play, standing by the conclusion that the crash was a tragic accident. Still, the lack of easily accessible evidence left the story feeling incomplete to outsiders. The absence of clarity allowed suspicion to linger, casting a long shadow over Murphy's legacy, and leaving many to wonder whether the war hero's life had ended not only in tragedy, but in something darker. Decades later, a group of independent aviation researchers and historians revisited the crash, driven by advancements in forensic analysis and the release of declassified government records. Using modern techniques unavailable in 1971, they re-examined weather data, air traffic reports, maintenance records, and surviving wreckage documentation. What they found did not support sabotage. The reinvestigation showed no credible evidence of tampering with the aircraft's control systems. Claims of cut or rerouted wiring were traced back to crash impact damage and misinterpretations of aging photographs. Flight data and reconstructed weather models confirmed that the aircraft encountered severe conditions, including dense fog, turbulence, and rapidly changing visibility, conditions especially dangerous in mountainous terrain. Interviews with aviation experts and retired officials also contradicted rumors of surveillance or targeting. No substantiated records placed Murphy under government scrutiny, nor did declassified documents reveal any covert information tied to him that would have made him a liability. The more the evidence was examined, the more the conspiracy theories collapsed under their own weight. What emerged instead was a far more sobering reality. Murphy was a passenger on a privately operated flight, navigating hazardous terrain in poor weather, flown by a pilot making a series of small but fatal decisions. Flying too low, pressing forward instead of turning back, trusting experience over conditions. A chain of human judgment errors, common in aviation accidents, proved catastrophic. The implications are unsettling not because they reveal betrayal or political intrigue, but because they offer no villain, no grand explanation, just a convergence of risk, weather, and choice that ended the life of a man who had already survived more danger than most people ever face. For Murphy's family, this conclusion brought a painful clarity. It closed the door on decades of speculation, but it also forced them to confront a truth that offered little comfort. There was no conspiracy to blame, no hidden enemy, just loss. And perhaps that is the hardest truth of all, that Audie Murphy, who survived the unimaginable horrors of war, was ultimately claimed not by enemies or secrets, but by the quiet, unforgiving randomness of fate. In the years since these renewed discussions began, some advocates and online commentators have called for a full public inquiry, arguing that a man who risked everything for his country deserves absolute transparency surrounding his death. Their calls are driven less by proof than by a deep discomfort with unanswered questions and a desire to reconcile Murphy's heroic image with the abrupt, senseless way his life ended. At the same time, historians and military experts have taken a more measured approach. Rather than chasing speculation, they've revisited Murphy's story within the broader context of Cold War America, an era defined by secrecy, mistrust, and a public condition to suspect hidden motives behind every tragedy. Hollywood's proximity to political power during that period only intensified those suspicions, blurring the line between coincidence and conspiracy. This renewed attention has reignited interest in the Audie Murphy mystery finally solved. And it isn't good, not because it confirms betrayal or shadowy plots, but because it strips away comforting myths. What remains is not a grand revelation, but a sobering reality. Even the most celebrated heroes are not immune to ordinary risks, human error, and cruel timing. The truth uncovered through decades of investigation does not point to sabotage, assassination, or silencing. It points to a tragic convergence of weather, terrain, and decision-making, factors that have ended countless lives in aviation history. The discomfort many still feel comes from how unsatisfying that answer is. There is no enemy to blame, no hidden hand to expose, and yet that truth forces a harder reflection. Audie Murphy survived the unimaginable violence of war, carried its scars for the rest of his life, and continued forward anyway, serving his country, his family, and the public with quiet humility. His death, sudden and unceremonious, stands in stark contrast to the legend built around him. Not because it reveals darkness beyond the battlefield, but because it reminds us how fragile even the strongest lives can be. The full story of Audie Murphy's death may never feel complete, not because facts are missing, but because no explanation can ever feel proportional to the life that was lost. What remains is a legacy defined not by mystery, but by courage, resilience, and an honesty that doesn't need embellishment. And perhaps that is the final truth, unsettling not because it's sinister, but because it's real.